Let's move on now to the issue of abstracts, which is an important part of your thesis. And we'll start our conversation about abstracts by talking about different types of abstracts or summaries and the type of abstract that you'll be writing for your thesis. You're not writing a descriptive abstract. So descriptive abstracts are not really summaries, they're just a description of what has been done. They're mostly context and purpose statement without a set of results or recommendations, and they're fairly short. So they do cover methods a little bit as well, but they just describe what's being done or what had been done in the project. That's not what we're after. We're also not writing really an executive summary, which is a summary of the project in itself, but is aimed at a non-technical audience. So leaves out technical terms, or doesn't really focus on the technical aspect of the design. The executive summaries would also focus on recommendations rather than the results of the research, and are designed to help executives make decisions. So that's why they're focused on those aspects of the work that you've done. Now, you're writing for your thesis an informative abstract, and this abstract has to really summarize the document as a whole. And it has to be considered a standalone document. So it's something that should be considered as something that's going to be read separately from the thesis. If I read this abstract, I should have a good idea of all aspects of the thesis. It should help to decide whether readers should read the whole thesis if they're interested in it. And this is probably something that you've gone through as well in terms of using the abstracts to choose articles to read or to choose which things to focus on in that particular thesis. So it's important that you're accurate and honest in your representation of your work in the abstract that you're writing. Now, it's important to keep in mind that it may not be read by thesis readers. If I know that I have to read your whole thesis, I might skip your abstract as well. So there shouldn't be information in the abstract itself that isn't in the document. Okay, it shouldn't be considered an introduction or something that sets the context, because it may not be read by thesis readers, and you've got to do that type of work in both the abstract and the document itself. So it's really a standalone document, something that stands apart from the thesis. Again, we're thinking of it as a technical summary for a highly technical audience, the same audience that would read your thesis. And again, it's supposed to be a short and concise summary of the entire work, so not just the overview. Of course, when you're trying to condense your entire thesis into something that is shorter than a page, there are some really key decisions that you're going to have to make. We know that you have to articulate a little bit of background and motivation before you get into your purpose statement. We know that you'd have to establish key elements of your methodology or the key aspects of your design and the way that you tested your design. We know that you want to articulate the key results of your experiment or the key aspects of your assessment of your design. And finally, we want to make sure that you articulate the major claims that your thesis can make. In doing all of these things, we want to think about economy. We want you to allow the audience to understand the motivation for the project quickly, using words such as however to articulate the fact that there is a problem is a really good way of signaling that that's the issue very quickly. When you're talking about your design, you really want to look, or your methods, you want to look at what is defining about that method or what is new about that design. And so you're trying to answer at all times, what is key? What sorts of things are essential in the results or in your testing of your design that you want to represent in your thesis, that you want somebody who's reading just a page of your thesis work to know. And of course, you want to only focus on the major claims here and don't get into some of the more peripheral issues for the thesis. So you really have to prioritize and decide what you're actually going to articulate as the key elements of your thesis, and that's a really important process of selection that you should consider very carefully. A couple of really key strategies for writing your abstracts. If you can, compose the abstract as you go along. So as you're doing your introduction, you might finish your introduction and try to boil it down to 2 to 3 sentences. Similarly, as you're writing your methods, you might do the same thing. And that allows you to develop the basis of your thesis abstract as you're going along. It's really important for you to look for similarities and relationships between your chapters to look for opportunities to condense the summary. So for example, if you've got similar methods but different samples, you can express that very quickly in a sentence. Same thing, same samples or different methods. You can kind of pair those things together very clearly or easily and economically in your writing. So there are opportunities to condense the summary aspect of the thesis abstract. Now, again, we want you to ensure that you treat it as a coherent, complete document that exists on its own. You need to be willing to sacrifice key details. That's really essential part of it. But finally, when you finish your abstract, you need to ask yourself this question, whether or not you've given your reader an accurate summary of your work and a reason to read your thesis. That's probably the most important part. Less important for your thesis abstract at this point, but important for abstracts that you'll write in the future, is the use of keywords and the presence of keywords in the abstract so that your abstract is properly searchable and recognizable to interested readers. So that's really important as well. So those are some key thesis abstract writing strategies that you should keep in mind as you're developing your abstract.